Hello, everybody, and welcome to Flashback to the Track podcast. I'm John Hindhaugh, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
You look like you're the DJ for New Order right now.
Yeah, so my desk actually goes up and I can stand. And the biggest problem with a standing desk is that you want to be like a DJ all day because you're standing there and you're hands on your laptop and you're listening to tunes. So yeah, it's a struggle. It's distracting.
I mean I don't really have that struggle yet, but anyways, welcome everyone to another edition of Flashback to the Track, the first podcast. We're recording in 2021. That's right. We've literally made a reference to the point in time we're in right now in this podcast. Yeah. It's pretty meta.
Yeah, I know. And we survived 2020. That's really the big thing, I think, is the big takeaway. And here we are, the first week of 2021 with some incredible content. And of course, couldn't do this without the support of Blue Emu, our long-time sponsor of the Flashback to the Track podcast, a great partner. Be sure to pick up some Blue Emu products for relief from minor aches and muscle strains and just uncomfort. Get yourself some Blue Emu.
It works fast and you won't stink. That's the best part, man. You don't stink, all right? You're not gonna be smelling like a Jones and dude. You get pain relief that don't stink.
That's the big thing, that's why it's so appealing. You just put it on and then it doesn't overpower your cologne that you have on, which is great, because if you're out there,
I don't really wear cologne. I'm an Old Spice guy. Just put my Old Spice lavender on, antiperspirant, don't sweat. But yeah, that's a different product for a different day.
But today, James, so we're kicking off January of 2021, and there's a big race at the end of January that actually goes for 24 hours. In Daytona. It's the 24 hours of Daytona, the Rolex 24 hours of Daytona. Got to get your sponsor plugs in there.
I'm more of the Sunbank 24 hours kind of guy.
Yes, Sunbank Mutual 24 hour. Yes.
Still in those days. You know what I mean?
You can just refer to it as the 24 hours of Daytona. Depends who your team sponsor is. If it becomes the redacted 24 hours of Daytona or
if you're sponsored by another watch company, you probably shouldn't say Rolex. If you're Tag Heuer's your sponsor, they're probably don't say Rolex, say 24 hours of Daytona.
Yeah. So we decided, we need to get someone on to talk about endurance racing because we did our live stream for New Year's and so many people in the comments talked about how they loved endurance racing and loved IMSA, which really surprised us. And James and I, we love IMSA. So IMSA pays our bills. So we love it. And we decided, why not go get the guy? James, who do we go get?
We got the voice of Radio Le Mans. To me, he's the voice of IMSA. I'm sorry, Tony. This guy is the voice. John Hindhaugh. All right. If you've ever heard a broadcast from an IMSA race on IMSA Radio, you have heard his voice. If you've ever listened to Radio Le Mans, listening to races like the 12 Hours of Bathurst, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, you have also heard this man as well. He just loves what he does. He loves racing. And most of all, he found a niche and he was able to carve out a path with that, which is really great to hear.
Yeah, John Hindhaugh is he's like a hero of mine almost. I interviewed him last year and it was just amazing to sit down and talk to him. Loves to talk. That's what you'll notice in this podcast. He loves to talk. You won't hear us for 15, 20 minutes at a time, but
yeah, so
not important that we talk.
Yeah. Let's stop talking. We'll let John start talking. We'll get to our interview now.
Well, John, I think we'll just jump right into it. And, I think the big thing, we're really happy that you joined us today. It's fantastic to have you from your home in England to us in Toronto and St. Petersburg, Florida. Or are you in Charlotte right now, John or James?
I'm in Charlotte, man. This is Valentine, Charlotte, South Carolina, North Carolina border, almost in NASCAR country, but,
it's close enough.
Yeah, close enough, exactly. I could throw a stone and maybe hit R&D Center or IMSA. I don't know. So IMSA's here.
Do you think that we are socially distanced enough then in these difficult times, gentlemen?
I would assume the World Health Organization would approve of this meeting 100%.
Okay. We're running okay as far as they're concerned. It's an absolute delight to be with you guys, and Happy New Year for 2021.
Yes, happy
New
New Year.
John. It's fantastic Yes. So John, the thing we want to talk about first, I think, you're known around the world, acclaim for your sport coverage of sports car racing. And I think when I met you last year and we sat down and chatted, I mentioned to you that there's not a sports car documentary that exists that you do not have a starring role in. And I think first thing we want to know that maybe a lot of people don't know is, how'd you get your start in broadcasting all the way up to where you are now?
How long have you got? This might be quite a long time. I've been doing this a very long time. And as you guys know, that when you do what we do in the media, in sport, and particularly in the media and sport, you can't do something on your own. So there's always a team behind you. And whilst I'm very fortunate to have a distinctive voice and I've been around long enough now that people know me, quite obviously I'm only a very, very small tooth, a small cog in the big gearbox of what goes on in endurance motor racing and in the broadcasting that we do. My start goes back years before you two were alive. I started off in having an idea that I was going to be a music DJ and work on radio. And in my very formative years, I might have to explain this to you two, with vinyl records and record players where you had to do that and put them on and you could see them going around. I found an old record player when I was not very old at all, probably 9 or 10, maybe 11, and some old 45s and even some 78s as well back in those days, and started playing them on this record player. And it had a little switch and a microphone so you could talk over the intros to the records. Now, what I didn't know then, and I only found out many, many years later, that my departed father, Tony, who has been part of what we do as well when he was alive, he had been a DJ, radio presenter, when he was in the Royal Air Force. And when he was doing his training in the UK, he was part of the radio station at the camp that they did all that training. And then subsequently, when he was deployed to active service in the Middle East, he carried on doing it. So I had no idea of that until many, many years after I'd started tinkering with broadcasting. Music was always something that was tremendously interesting to me. And I tried in my early years of what we would call secondary school, so 12, 13, 14, borrowed a guitar and started to play, and I didn't really get on with it very well. Ironically now, as I own several guitars, and I'm not very good on it, but I've stuck with it a bit longer, and I can strum a tune here and there. And music was so important to me, all types of music, but obviously the popular music of the day. And I had it in my head that I was going to work on national radio. Back in those days, we're talking mid to late 70s in the UK. There was little or no commercial radio, certainly not national commercial radio. And in the northeast of England, where I lived in Sunderland, there was no commercial radio station. So to work, you would have had to work for the BBC. And with a regional accent, which has become one of my identifying features, of course, down through the years, there was not a chance that I was going to get a job in even BBC regional or local radio. So if I'd thought about this, I could have dug out some cassette tapes, something else that I have to explain to you. I could have dug out some old tapes of demos that I did in the early years where I was just trying too hard to sound like somebody else and not to sound like somebody who came from the northeast. And long story short, I ended up working in radio, but by a very, very circuitous route. And ultimately, I worked for the BBC in Newcastle in the northeast, which was a regional centre. Worked as a reporter, a presenter, and a producer. And at the same time, I was doing some production work for a national kids TV program, pop TV program that was broadcast out of commercial radio in the northeast. And I also worked for commercial radio in the northeast when that came around, although I didn't work as a presenter there. And that was where the other side of things and of my career came from. I worked I was attached to commercials and commercial production for what was then Metro Radio out of Newcastle. Quite an extraordinary thing that to have commercial radio because it hadn't existed before then. So one of my jobs was trying to persuade people to use commercial radio, which was great because you only had to convince them to use commercial radio, not our commercial radio. If they bought into radio and advertising on radio, there was only us that we could use in the whole of the Northeast, which was quite a big catchment area, big transmission service area, TSA. And I was very fortunate enough to work with a guy called Mike Burson there in the commercial production department. And I went on to look after the promotions and marketing side of things, dealt with road shows and personal appearances for the presenters and the DJs, and therefore got a bit of a commercial grounding, but also at the same time being very highly skilled thanks to Mike, who was, and I use this word advisedly, a genius. Mike Burson, look him up. He's written some great papers on how radio works, theatre of the mind, the imaginative way that you can use radio because you conjure up the pictures rather than present the pictures to people. And all those things have stayed with me. And then, as I say, I went to the BBC. I ended up in London doing a news appreciation course in the middle of the IRA bombing campaign down there. So instead of just being trainees, we got pushed out to do that. So I had a really, really good grounding in the basics of radio broadcasting, both commercial and the BBC news gathering, and just generally how to put a show together, whether that was cutting tape and splicing it together, how to interview, how the medium of radio works. At the same time, almost parallel with that, I was interested in motor cars, always had been. There's a family story, which may be apocryphal, but neither my mum or my dad are around to disprove this anymore, disavow it. But apparently my first words, according to family legend, were Vauxhall Viva, which was a small General Motors car that was driving around in the mid-1960s. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it tells you just how interested in motor cars I was. Interesting because my dad never had a car. He was a cop and he was getting paid so badly that we couldn't afford a family car. And so we didn't have a family car for quite some time. But I was thoroughly interested in cars, the working of cars. And as I grew up, that never went away. And of course, when you think back to those days, and again, 1960s, 1970s, motorsport wasn't on the TV, such as the TV was. And bear in mind, 1973 was the first soccer FA Cup final in the UK that was broadcast in colour. So there wasn't a lot of sport on telly. There wasn't a lot of live sport. So there was no motorsport. So all the motorsport I consumed on the wireless, on the radio. And it was, again, all building from all of these things that came together in a bizarre way. But the real catalyst for all of it was when I was coming to the end of my secondary education and decided whether I wanted to go on to tertiary further education and go and do college or whatever, A-levels and then college, as we would say in this country, university. I decided I didn't want to. I decided I wanted to get out in the wide world and earn some money. I was just coming up to 16. And I believe it or not, I went and worked in a bank. A lot of my friends from school went on to further education, moved away, so I was kind of losing touch with them. So I had a lot of free time. I had just blown out my cartilages on my right leg playing soccer and been in hospital for a wee while. And so whilst I was in hospital, I heard hospital radio. So once I had some free time, I went back, I volunteered for hospital radio, and I started my broadcasting career. And all of these things began to come together to the point whereby when a guy that actually now works with us quite a lot, Joe Bradley, one of our pit lane reporters for Haggerty Radio Le Mans, he was karting. He was competitively karting 100 national karts in the Northeast and around the country. And when the kart club needed a new PA system and somebody to commentate on one of the national series that went there, I put my hand up really quickly, grabbed our technical guy from hospital radio, and for a donation to our hospital radio funds, because that was all voluntary, of course, we put in a 100-volt line PA system, and I went and commentated on the British Nationals and the All-Plate Championship or whatever it was. And that was the first time I'd done commentary. So radio, music, commentary, motorsport, all sort of came together without any kind of plan. And I was still trying to earn a living and what my father would have called was a proper job. So I was working in a bank. I went and worked for local government, did all kinds of weird and wonderful things. And this was all still a hobby at this point. And it took quite a long time before it wasn't a hobby. And to be honest, I wasted a lot of time then when I should have been pushing myself in the broadcast and the motorsport side of things. But what, you're going to make money out of talking about motorsport and getting excited about motorsport? It's never going to happen, except it did, which is why I consider myself tremendously fortunate. When I was in those formative teenage years, my dad, who was still a cop at that time, he said to me when I was complaining about I didn't know what I wanted to do, when the careers teacher was talking to me about, come on, Hindhaugh, what do you want to do? And make it sensible, by the way. Don't say you want to go to the moon. Don't say you want to be a racing driver. Don't say you want to be a pilot, because that sort of stuff doesn't happen to people with my background, working class background, coming from a working class area of the Northeast. And I didn't know. So I said to my dad, I don't know what I want to do, Dad. And he said, well, son, I'll give you a bit of advice that my father gave to me. He says, if you show me a man who loves his job, I'll show you a man who'll never work a day in his life. And I said, Dad, that's brilliant. I have no clue what that means when I was 15. However, I do now. And he was absolutely right. And I have been massively fortunate to have trodden that path, that circuitous path. There's no straight lines here. There's no clever career choices. You happen to be in the right place at the right time. Somebody hears your voice. You put your hand up to fit that PA system at the kart track to do that 25th anniversary meeting or whatever it was at Felton Kart Club. And that's where these things go through. It's that sliding doors moment, isn't it? Where you could go that way or you could go that way and your life would have been so different. I've been really, really fortunate that I've taken some interesting detours down the way and they've taken me to some very nice little places.
Well, you can only connect the dots looking back, right? That's the thing,
That's very astute, very astute. Because if you'd said, "Here's a career path, and this is what you're going to follow," my careers master at school at Farringdon Comprehensive would have went, "No, can't say that working, Hindhaugh. Can't say that working." And even with what we do now with Radio Show Limited, which we produce 5,000-6,000 hours of radio and TV a year, of which about 85% of that is live, and that's pretty much all from a track somewhere in the world. Even that, it wasn't really a plan. It sort of morphed through to get where we are, and being on the internet, and we were internet pioneers. We didn't know it. It's just what we had to do to keep the audience and to get the audience size big enough to justify what we were doing at Radio Le Mans when I was working with Autosport. And all of these things, as you say, retrospectively, it looks like you can join the dots. The dots weren't visible as you were walking down that little country road and nipping off through the trees and over a farmer's field and wherever. It's only when you look at that helicopter view afterwards with that hindsight you were talking about that you realise that one thing, if it didn't lead to another, it suggested something. And when you're playing Gran Turismo or Forza, if you're playing Forza Motorsport and you're going through your career mode and they're giving you a little challenge and you don't really understand why that challenge is there until, oh, hang on a minute, I've learned a new skill now. I've driven a new part of the Nürburgring Nordschleife, or I've this track somewhere else at Brands Hatch. Oh, now I understand why I've done that, because I now have to go into this championship and race there. That's the sort of progression that I'm talking about. It didn't always look obvious, but now when you look back, as you say, the dots look like they're there. But at the time, they didn't.
No, it also becomes second nature, too. So you understand also where that experience that you had can now relate into a real-world application for yourself.
Correct.
Something that you brought with you as you went on this journey was your voice. You said you have such a distinct voice. When did you really understand that you had not just a voice for radio, but a tone and presence and understanding how to really carry yourself on radio.
Well, again, that comes back to a lot of different features. The thing is, as my father said, I've got a face for radio, definitely. Why anybody ever wants to put me in front of a camera, I never know. So this is still a little bit alien to me, even after all of these years. Go back to what I said about wanting to work in professional radio and having a hint of a northeast accent was a no-no. The only regional accent that was acceptable in those days would have been if you had a soft Scottish accent, possibly a soft Welsh or Irish accent. But all of the regions from the UK, including even just a London soft Cockney accent, wouldn't have been acceptable in those days. Moving into hospital radio and doing PA commentary, I didn't realise that it would still be an issue. I found my own voice, which is why when you hear me commentate, I don't sound like I'm putting anything on, because you can't. After a while, you forget. And, that's why I have a massive admiration for actors who get into a part and have to speak in a voice other than their own. And I don't just mean their words, I mean the actual timbre of their voice, their manner of speaking, and potentially even a national or regional accent. Now, we can all do it a little bit, and, a Scottish and Irish, a Welsh, a London accent for us in the UK, the same as for you guys. All right, well, there's a bit of a difference between certainly a Brooklyn accent and a Georgia accent and you can sustain it, and you can be, if you like, a caricature of that accent for a little while. But what, doing a 12-hour race in somebody else's voice doesn't bear thinking about, does it? You're concentrating hard enough just to get the words out and not make too many mistakes. Trying to do it in someone else's voice, you can't do it. So I settled on the voice I had, cleaned up one or two of the typical voice. What's the word I'm looking for? The accent in the Northeast. Number one, we normally talk very quickly. We can sometimes get a little bit lazy with T's and D's in the middle of words and INGs on the end. If you clean that up a bit, then what's the matter with the way anybody speaks? So long as you can make yourself known to someone else who speaks English. And in fairness, actually, when I came over to the US in 1998 to do the first Petite Le Mans, that was when I realized how fast I spoke. I didn't really realize it. So again, we're talking about a progression. But you've got to remember that before all of that, I was told by the establishment in motorsport in the UK that I wasn't a motorsport voice, not with an accent like that. Oh, heavens, no. You had to be talking like this. Hello, and welcome to the circuit and the home of British motor racing. And it's a very warm welcome from me. And I was told, even though I was available, I wanted to do it, I wanted to learn. And in fact, even at that time, I think I'd already done a couple of Le Mans at that time, and it was a sports car race. No, you're not a British motorsport voice for a PA commentary. So you have to make a decision, don't you, about how authentic you want to be. The irony of all of that is the reason I was in the States in the first place was that I had done Radio Le Mans, and joining the dots again, that's what you said. I was there when I first went to Le Mans in 89. Wasn't there as a commentator. I hadn't done any commentary. I was a long way away from doing commentary at that time. Interested in motorsport, yes. Could I add to a conversation? Yes. Could I interview a guest? Absolutely. I wasn't a commentator, not a play-by-play guy. I was there playing music. So, bizarrely, there's me having fulfilled my childhood and teenage ambition of being a music DJ with vinyl still. I think I only got the job, if I'm honest, guys, because I had quite a big record collection and I brought it down to Le Mans with me. And therefore, have you got any records? Yes. All right, you're in. I honestly think there might have been a bit of that. So for my formative years at Radio Le Mans, I wasn't calling the action. I was playing music, and I helped do the ad logs and traffic the ads from the different sponsors, which were getting played in the old-fashioned Sonifex carts in those days. And you had to tick them off, and you could only have 8 minutes per hour because of French radio authority regulations. And because I was the one that didn't talk with the classic clipped, received pronunciation, British Broadcasting Corporation, British Motorsport voice, when Dr. Don Paynos, God rest his soul, decided he was going to start and do the first Petit Le Mans, which ultimately led on to the ALMS, he asked a chap called Joe Widensall, who's still around, lives in Indianapolis, who phenomenally was one of the first Beatles' first tour managers in the States, and was a radio man himself. Fabulous stories Joe has down through the years. Joe was tasked with finding that guy with the funny voice from Radio Le Mans. And so he tracked me down. So when Petit Le Mans happened in 1998, in the October, end of September, beginning of October of that year, I got a phone call about that race in July or August, whenever it was. And that was because I was the guy who spoke differently. So again, here's all these dots. To come back to what you said earlier, here's all these dots that look like it's a solid progression, but have come from so far left field. And this thing that stopped me getting work in motorsport put me on the track to being where I am now. The guy with the funny voice from Radio Le Mans, Geordie John from Radio Le Mans. I would say, by the way, I'm not a Geordie. That's somebody from Newcastle. I'm from Sunderland. I'm a Wearsider or a Mackham. But okay, that's splitting hairs very much. But that's why I got the call, and that's why I put together the team in '98 to go across to Road Atlanta, now Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta, and I'd put Radio Le Mans on the web in 97. 97, I think, was the first year Radio Le Mans was on the web, which we cobbled together. And some of the technology, such as it was, bits of string and chewing gum and telephones, some of the technology that we had for that, we took out to the States. We put a radio station together. The next year, ALMS started, and ka-ching, from doing one motor race a year at Le Mans, 4 or 5 days of broadcasting, we were doing 10 races in the American Le Mans series from 99 onwards. In the golden age, where the ALMS was the de facto world championship. There was no world championship for sports cars. Didn't need one. Had the ALMS. Thank you, Dr. Don. And I and we as a group, and particularly technically, when you do one event a year and then you put everything away and you come back to it, it takes you some time to get back in the swing of it. When you're doing an event every 4 to 6 weeks, not only do you hone your skills, but you're finding new solutions to things. And bear in mind, that first race at Petit Le Mans in 1998, when I stood next to Jim Martin, the Canadian motorsport play-by-play maestro, and put the headset on, and the cars rolled out, and we were on the internet for the first time. That was the first time I'd commentated with him. That was the first, we'd only met literally that week. And that was the first time I'd done a full race commentary, a full race play-by-play. So we were learning so quickly, but because the events in 99, 2000, 2001 came so fast, it was a massive, massive dump of information that we had to get our heads around. And from that, we made changes. We moved with the technology. We moved from dial-up to ISDN lines to different ways of getting the internet, and ultimately actually going back to the internet now and IP codecs and low latency video feeds and all of those things that we had to go back to or refine for 2020 when everything changed again.
Oh, hello. Didn't see you there. I was just using this Blue Emu Continue spray. It provides maximum relief for my sore and tired body in a continuous spray. And it's so good, it's endorsed by Mark.
Yeah, it's fantastic, guys. I'm telling you. I don't endorse a lot of products. I'm very selective, but the spray is amazing because you just spray it on. You don't have to touch anything. Your hands don't get dirty. You just spray it on. You're good to go. You can get to the hard to reach spots of your body, like calves, especially for me from running. Spray it on there. Good to go.
And the best part, odor free. I'm not stinking. I can just go about my day, and I've got maximum relief. It's genius. Whoever thought of this should win a Nobel Prize in science. Make sure you pick yourself a can of Blue Emu Continuous Spray. It works fast, and you won't stink.
Now let's get back to the podcast. So I think, John, that's a good segue because you talked about the American Le Mans series and then becoming kind of the voice of that series. And it's a great series that we grew up watching. I'll even say, I used to listen to them where I'm from, on podcast in 06, 07. I would listen to them the week after the race because if I couldn't catch it live. And that was the only way I could get it because you couldn't get it on TV. But you're really, you're the voice of IMSA Radio now. And IMSA, we work in IMSA, last few years, and IMSA is such an amazing championship, and it's an American series, but it feels American with the circuits it goes to, with non-permanent garages and things like that. It feels very colloquial to America, but it really belongs to the whole world. And what would you say, if you had 2 minutes to explain it to someone, what makes IMSA such a great championship?
Well, you've hit on it right there. There is something for everyone. If you remember the old IMSA, the American Le Mans series, their tagline was for the fans and American attitude, European style. And those things, together with the juggernaut that is Daytona and NASCAR, when they took it over into what was then the United Sports Car Championship, and really did bring all of the best bits of Grand Am, the ALMS, IMSA, NASCAR, Daytona together, it means there is genuinely something for everybody. Remember, by the way, when NASCAR bought IMSA or bought the American Le Mans series from Dr. Don Panos, it was to shut it down within a year and a half. Yeah, and look where we are now. And it is still, to me, one of, if not the preeminent sports car championships in the world. And not just the WeatherTech Championship as well. That's the key. I don't think there's another sanctioning body certainly not in North America, probably not then in the world, that goes to as many different tracks, whether it's road circuits, natural terrain road circuits, street tracks, even rovals, and with such a different variety of machinery. And nowadays, with balance of performance, their technical department has to be absolutely on point. And there's no which way is the wind blowing today. It's all data-driven, extraordinary. If you look at the ACO, Le Mans, WEC, ELMS, Asian Le Mans Series, yes, that's a big thing for them to do. But generally speaking, that's the same classes of car in different regional or world championships. When you look at what IMSA do, you've got DPI, you've got LMP2, LMP3, GT Le Mans, GTE in ACO speak, GT3, GT4, TCR, Mazda MX-5 Global coming back into the fold for 2021, Ferrari Challenge, Porsche Carrera Cup North America for the first time in 2021, and Lamborghini, and the LMP3 Cup itself, IMSA Prototype Challenge, and. That's extraordinary when you think about it. But what it does in that very beautiful American way is, it means, like when you go into the supermarket and there's 126 different choices of your favorite orange juice, with or without bits, with or without acid, with added vitamins, there is literally something for any. If people say they like motor racing and they can't find it in IMSA, they must be walking around with their eyes closed, quite frankly.
Oh, for sure. I love, to your point, WeatherTech is just one series. I'm a huge fan of the Pilot Challenge series. It's a series I've always gotten to cover. To me, what makes it really great is the relatability of cars. And I think that's what's amazing about sports car racing in general. Not Mark and I are NASCAR guys. We love NASCAR. But sports cars, there's just something there. And something that I remember you bringing up in the past, and it's so pivotal and so true. What we learn from street cars and road cars does transition into our race cars, but what we learn from race cars directly goes right back into the street performance. Do you feel like in sports car racing there's more of that than in any form of motorsports on the planet?
In fairness, it's more easily relatable. It's much harder, although this is true. True story. Toyota, their World Championship Le Mans prototype program, the TSO 50, which has just been retired. They start in 2021 with their new car, as yet unnamed, which will be their hypercar. That program is not paid for by a marketing budget. That is paid for from road car research and development, road car R&D. Now, look at the cars. You think that bat wing's going on a Lexus or a Prius, or that steering wheel is going to turn up on a Corolla or a Tacoma or whatever? No, of course it isn't. But Toyota genuinely believe that the technology transfer and what they learn in the 200 mile an hour moving, shaking, hot, cold, bashing together laboratory that is endurance racing for up to 24 hours at a time, by the way, that technology, that knowledge of, nowadays in particular, systems, how they work together, how the hybrid works with the internal combustion engine, how the car harvests energy and where it stores it, and how you can get that back, and how the systems talk to each other under the most extreme situations. That's what they get out of that. And Alex Wirtz did an interview with us on our prototype panel for Midweek Motorsport recently. Alex Wirtz, former driver, now one of their ambassadors. And that is the benefit. And those lessons mean the next Prius, the next Lexus, RX, whatever, is going to be better because motorsport improves the breed. Now, there'll be people out there shouting at their screens at the moment going, Hindhaugh, you don't know what you're talking about. When was the last time that we genuinely saw something out of motorsport that hadn't already been in a road-going car, a straight car? Well, all right, I'll give you that. You can talk about the disc brakes in the early 1960s at Le Mans. You can talk about engine management systems, double clutch gearboxes. Porsche were doing those years and years ago. But you can come up to date a little bit more into the 2000s. TFSI, Audi, very, very carefully measured fuel injection, transformed the fuel mileage, the fuel consumption of gasoline, petrol engines. That came out of motorsport. Performance diesel. All right, it's a dirty word now, I know. But performance diesel, still very, very much applicable here in Europe, although not so much as usual, as it was, should I say. That came out of motorsport. The systems working together, as we just mentioned with Toyota, how do you integrate a hybrid for either economy or power or reliability or all of the above in that virtuous triangle that people will tell you doesn't exist? That's what we're learning. And yes, there will be things that we know about from street cars. Moving aerodynamics, speed-dependent aerodynamics, shutting off part of the radiator grills, cars moving up and down on the suspension. Some of those things aren't allowed in motorsport, but they will be, and they will be refined if they come into motorsport, because I'll guarantee you if somebody thinks they can get an advantage from it, then it will happen. And the perfect example of that is, like it or loathe it, we are all going to have to think a little more about electric coming up in the next less than a decade. Now, it's not the full story, and it's certainly not the full solution, but it's part of it. Here's a story from endurance racing. When LMP1 Hybrid was introduced by the ACO for Le Mans and the World Championship, the World Endurance Championship, the regulations we couldn't make head nor tail of. But the regulations allowed for them to keep cutting the amount of fossil fuel that you were allowed to do these races, and also the fuel flow. And it also started bringing the tyres smaller and limiting the aerodynamics. It was all about efficiency. We didn't realise it then, but what it made everybody do, and if you remember, we started with Porsche, Toyota and Audi, all with different ideas of what the hybrid engine should be. Supercapacitor, which sounds like something out of Guardians of the Galaxy or the Avengers, for Toyota. You had batteries, and you had a flywheel. Everybody eventually graduated to batteries. But again, true story. When Porsche first came in, they approached the battery company. They told them the size of the battery, the weight of the battery, the target weight, where it was going to be mounted in the car. And they were looking, I think at those times it was 2, 4 or 6 megajoules of battery power. They were looking for 2 megajoules. And they kind of got 2 at the start of the race. But by the end of a 6-hour race, they weren't getting 2 megajoules. In their second year, they moved up to a 6 megajoule battery pack that was as good at the end of Le Mans as it was at the beginning, still giving the full 6 megajoules. That's how quick motorsport pushes on technology. And the reason for that wasn't because the battery company said, oh, we can do stuff better for you. It was because Porsche said, we need you to improve. We need you right. You don't understand this, do you? Let's buy the company. So Porsche bought the battery company. And strangely enough, Audi bought another battery company and the same thing. And that sort of benefit is why we have the Porsche Taycan right now, why we have the Audi e-tron Quattro, and why we have those plug-in ICE and hybrids with super efficient batteries. Are we there yet? No. Are we at the end of the road? No. Is there still something to come? Yes. Audi and Porsche both looking at synthetic fuel, so that we could still pump. Do we still call it gas? I don't know. Do we still call it petrol? We still pump fuel into the car, but it's been made out of light crystals or something. I honestly don't know. They're growing it in the desert. They're cracking hydrogen with excess hydroelectric and solar power from national grids. They're growing algae, which when you subject it to a huge amount of heat, and Audi's got a place out in the desert that looks like something in South America that looks like something from a James Bond movie where a villain's hanging out. When you do that, you get fuel that you can use in petrol and diesel cars at not no cost to the planet, but certainly far less than cracking fossil fuels. And all of this could the quest for efficiency and better cars. Now, racing plays a part in that because the accelerated development that you have on a racing car and in a racing series, yes, we keep regulations for about 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years of terms is that much. 3 to 5 years in racing terms is that much. And also, in racing terms, you can't say, sorry, boss, that new mid-size sedan or SUV that we were going to launch next March, can we stick it back to Q3 because we're having a little bit of problem with the manufacturer of one of the tail light clusters? Well, can you imagine a motor racing team saying to IMSA, hi, IMSA, it's Hinhaugh Racing here. Yeah, I know it's supposed to be Daytona at the end of January, but you couldn't just stick it in. Can we do Sebring first and then we can put it in after that? Would that work for you? It doesn't happen. And that's what motor racing does. It concentrates the mind. I used to work for a design development team not so very far away from where I'm standing now, in the middle of the carbon fibre triangle in the middle of the UK, Ray Mallock, RML. And just at the time that I started there, in fact, when I went there, we were just starting the Celine S7R project, the design, development and original racing of the S7R, GT1 as it was then. But they were just finishing up with Nissan and the Primera Super Touring project. And they regularly used to have production engineers from Nissan up in Sunderland in the northeast of England, where I came from, and from Japan, to work on secondment to the development team and the race team, to get them to understand the key performance indicators are so different. And guess what, mate? A deadline's a deadline. You can't just move that a little bit further down the wall planner to over here. No, it doesn't work like that. And that I think is one of the great beauties of, let's go back to IMSA. So many of the cars that you see in IMSA are either aspirational or at least relatable to the people who are standing watching, whether it's live on the bank sides or in the bleachers. listening on the TV or the radio further afield, whether it's TCR, which is brilliant, by the way. I think that was a really good addition by IMSA. TCR will be, for touring car racing, what GT3 and GT4 did to GT racing. GT4, GT3, GT Le Mans. Right, all of those you go, oh, yeah, I'd like one of those on the drive. And if you want something exotic, then you have got the P2s and the DPIs. And you can't deny that those things, yeah, they look like spaceships, but my goodness me, they're entertaining. And that's the key. And that's what we were talking about before, why IMSA, if it's not everything to all people, it's pretty damn close to it.
And so, John, like, you talk about IMSA and we love IMSA and we want to talk about it, but I also wanted to really talk to you about some of the other more exotic events that you get to cover as part of RSL. And there's a race called the Rolex 24. And then right after that race ends, you've been awake for 24 hours, you hop on an airplane and you fly to New South Wales in Australia and you call it Bathurst 12-hour, which is the next weekend, which I really want to talk to you about because that's one of my I think it's my favorite race in the world. And I've never been able to go to it, but I've watched it on television this year. And I listened on the radio this year while driving home from Daytona. I listened to you guys because I drove from Toronto to Daytona, but it's an incredible event with such great GT3 machinery. Correct. Driving up the mountain. Tell us about that event and the process that goes with calling it and why it's so special.
Well, first of all, you've got to go, because experiencing racing at Mount Panorama at Bathurst in New South Wales is life-changing. It's spiritual. It was spiritual for me. It took me far too long to get there. I've got a distant family connection with a cousin several times removed, Bruce Hindhaugh, who actually won his class in the late 1960s or the early 1970s in, of all things, a 1-litre Toyota, a little hatchback thing, when it was still a class race. When the 1000, the big race there, was still a class race. He subsequently went on to build engines, including for the great Peter Brock. And there is a Bathurst winner from the mid-70s, I want to say. I think it was 76. Should have had Crailsey here for this, Richard Crails. With the Hindhaugh name on the front. In fact, hang on.
For everyone listening, John just stepped off to go grab something, so let's see what he's going to grab.
See, because I was in the studio, I could get this. So this is a Holden Tirana with a big V8 up front. And it was 1975. There you go. 1975. And on the front of there, you might not be able to see it because I don't think the camera's too good. But it says...
Oh, you see it right there.
Gowan
Brown
Hindhaugh.
Yeah.
Well, that was the engine builders. And I've seen the car in real life at the Australian Motorsport Museum. Well, that was cousin Bruce. And his daughter Jodie still runs the engineering company down in Melbourne. I've never met her. My dad tracked her down many years ago, just before I went to Bathurst for the first time, about 8 or 9 years ago. And, I mean, what do you say? First of all, for a Brit going to Australia, there's an awful lot about Australia that is very, very comforting and very British. The Aussies will hate me saying that. But they drive on the proper side of the road, the left-hand side, where you guys started before you decided to go to the other side. What was that about? What, on Thursday? Tell you what, tomorrow, let's drive on the other side of the road. What was that about? Anyway, they drive on the same side of the road as us, although all of their speed limits are in kilometres instead of miles an hour. So it's the same but different. And it's so hand in the air from the Canadian there. Thank you. Very, very good. There's aspects of it that is quite familiar, things that are quite different. What makes the Litwin Molly Bathurst 12 hours, the race it is Mount Panorama. It could so easily just be another GT3 race. And let's be honest, there's plenty of those, and there's nothing wrong with that. Plenty of them. It's not just a GT3 race, it's a multi-class race. And long may it stay that, because I think multi-class racing adds something extra to any race. It's a tight, challenging circuit up the side of a hill and down the other side. Started as a scenic drive, never meant to be necessarily motor racing, but pretty much as soon as it was put down there, people started racing cars and motorbikes up there. A bit like Pikes Peak, which is another one of my must-do if you haven't done it, to tick it off your bucket list type of things. And the challenge of Bathurst to do 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 laps is extraordinary. To do 12 hours, and it is the longest race at Bathurst. The Bathurst 1000 normally we'll be looking for the lap number when we've done 1,000 kilometres, as it is. That's the big Aussie, the supercars race down there in October. And that is bonkers. Not been to that, like to go, but it's normally about a third longer again than that. They normally take about 6 hours to get through that, sometimes a bit more, depending on the yellow flag and the safety car situation. So doing 12 hours, even if you've got 3 or 4 drivers in a GT3 car, is actually a pretty tall order. It's a pretty good test of man and machine. And that's what endurance racing is about, let's be honest. The regulations are pretty tight in how many tyres you can use and pit stops, etc. It's a particularly Australian race because of where it is. And Bathurst, by the way, the town of Bathurst, little gold mining town, it's about 90 miles out of Sydney, so it should take you about an hour and a half, but the speed limits are so low to get up there. It normally takes you a couple of hours or even more. But if you go up the back roads through the Blue Mountains, the scenery is absolutely heartbreakingly beautiful. And the last time we went there, which was last year, that was my last overseas trip, last time I was on a plane. So February 2020, they just had all the fires and the place was just starting to come back. Oh my goodness, it was terrible. But also the green shoots already coming through makes you realise how resilient nature is. It's just a beautiful part of the world. And the racetrack itself, I've been fortunate to do a few laps there in street cars. I did a road test of a 991 GT3 touring around there that I had when I went for the 6-hour race a couple of years ago. The 6-hour race is on over the Easter weekend. Very much more production-based cars there, but still multi-class. Fabulous little event that as well. I've done a couple of goes in their race school there in a V8, and the place, you can't help but giggle when you drive around it. And every single driver, the first few years I went there, and it was still very much an Australian race. There were a few internationals went down there, but it was an Australian race in the first few years that I went down there 9 years ago. And the drivers that I know in series from IMSA to the WEC, which we were still doing TV for in those days, to Le Mans, to British touring cars, to rally, every driver that I spoke to, pretty much after that first broadcast, international broadcast that we did, because they didn't have one until we did it, they said, you get very excited about this Bathurst thing. Is it as good as you're saying it is? I went, no, it's not. It's way better. So do I need to drive there? Yes. I remember having that conversation with Guy Smith, Le Mans winner 2003, Bentley driver. He said to me, Hindhaugh, you've gone bonkers for this race. I said, you've got to get Bentley to come down, mate. The Aussies are going to love the big V8s. Get them down. And of course they did. And eventually, not with Guy, but eventually they won the race. It's extraordinary. And the people are extraordinary. The town is racing. Built on gold. Grew up with the railways. Living now for racing. Unbelievable. If you've come from Europe, and particularly from the UK, like I do, the only time that you hear local council and racetrack in the same sentence, it's normally because there's a complaint about noise or they want to shut it down. Now, the local council in Bathurst built the pit lane complex and all of the hospitality units on the top. They paid for the upgrade of the catch fencing to FIA standards. We're talking about a town here that is absolutely 100% steeped in racing. And the previous mayor of the town, Graham, I know him. I only go there once or twice a year. I know him better than I know the mayor of my own town, because he comes in to see me every time. And when you're sitting having an evening meal down in the main street of Bathurst itself, which is a beautiful, beautiful Australian gold mining town, he'll put, "Hello, John. All right, Mr. Mayor." Don't call me Mr. Mayor. I mean, it's just, and the atmosphere of the people that go there for that race, it's become bigger and bigger and bigger. Of course, supercars events have taken it over and invested in it even further. The television coverage has just got, I mean, way beyond what we started with. It's been extraordinary, and it's a shame it won't happen in 2021, but my goodness, when it comes back in 2022 or whenever, put it on your list. Put it on your list, because I guarantee you'll be talking about it for 2 weeks straight afterwards, and your friends will not want to pick up the phone to you, because that's all you're going to want to talk about. The drive up there, the Australian experience, the hospitality, the food, the restaurants, the bars, the people, the chat about motor racing, the Australian National Motor Museum, which is right there at Murray's Corner, at the final corner of the circuit. Oh, man. I remember the first time I went there, we picked up an Audi in Sydney, straight off the plane. It was an A4 Quattro, 2-litre TFSI Quattro, I think it was. And I drove out of Sydney thinking it wouldn't take us too long to get there. But the speed limits, as I said, are pretty slow. So after I'd been driving for about an hour and a half, getting on for 2 hours, we decided to stop for a cup of coffee. We stopped at a McDonald's, a Macca's, obviously, and had a cup of coffee. And Eve, the responsible adult, said, "Do you want me to drive the rest of it?" I went, "I'm bored of driving at 45, 50, 60 Ks. Yeah, you can drive." So we come out of the Macca's, turn right, head up, straight away it goes up to 100k. And then over the top of the next brow, it's 110k. And it's the best bit of roads we've seen since we've come out of Sydney. And we're getting there. And of course, I'm sitting in the left-hand seat, sat nav's on, Eve's driving away. And we get up. And then on the left-hand side, you see the hill with Bathurst in the stone, in white, iconic. Is that so? Stupid Hindhaugh here says to Eve, "Do you think that's Bathurst up there? You think that's Mount Panorama?" Mount Panorama, but I can't read that from here. She said, "Do you think they put names on every hill around here?" I went, good point. So we drive straight to the track. You come in across a roundabout, in at the final corner, turn right. I find it wrong ever to drive the wrong way around a racetrack. So we get there. It's a public road, remember? So we turn right, and Eve says, "Oh, wow, we're on the start-finish straight." She's still driving. So we go up. It's I think it's a 40k, maybe 45k speed limit. Might even be less than that. But you're on the track, and the grid hash marks are all there, and you're going up to Hell Corner, which is the first left-hander. Curbs on the inside, all freshly painted. We're in race week, of course, by then. And Eve, I knew she was a keeper the first time I got in a car with her. She moves out to the right-hand side, takes the line, goes in, not fast, we're not squealing tyres, we're not throwing the car around, takes the line, drifts out to the right-hand side, up Mountain Straight. As we're going up Mountain Straight, drifts back over as we're coming over the top. I said, "By the way, just want to remind you, it's two-way traffic here." And she went, "Oh, I'm on a racetrack. It can't be two-way traffic." I went, "It's two-way traffic. It's just a normal public road." And the words were not out of my mouth. We go through Griffin Bend, which is effectively turn 2, and start heading up towards the cutting. And Eve dutifully stayed. There's no white line, dotted line in the middle of the road to delineate which side of the road you need to be on. And coming the other way is a refuse truck coming down the hill, having just collected everybody's bins from the day. It's that bizarre, but it's so go do it. Save your air miles.
100%. Yeah, give me goosebumps, John. I got to get there for sure. Like, I have yet to this day in any simulator do a clean lap at speed of that track. Like, maybe like a GT4 car, maybe, but like anything beyond that, it's like you hit one of the walls for sure. But we'll move on a little bit. I think we really want to talk about iRacing, speaking of simulators, so esports, because this year everybody was really down on esports for a long time. And then real sports went away and esports became the forefront this year. And everyone realized its legitimacy.
Mm-hmm.
The IMSA iRacing stuff was incredible. It was so entertaining. I covered them as a PR person and a social person. I had a great time doing that. And just talk about this kind of the challenges of that. And did you get lost in it like it was a real race? Is there a difference between calling iRacing and calling real racing?
Yes, there is. You get better pictures on simulations because you've got unlimited cameras, unlimited angles, unlimited replays. Particularly when we were doing the first season of the digital Nürburgring Langstrecke series, what used to be called VLN. It's extraordinary. You couldn't put the amount of cameras out. I'll tell you the big thing about the IMSA iRacing Pro Series. Guy called Drew at iRacing, who we work with very, very closely, who does all of their live events. And when this was coming together, it was sort of we really need to do something. IMSA wasn't sure. We were fortunate because we'd had forays into the digital world of racing before. If you go back far enough, Need for Speed Pro Street, my voice is in the game. Didn't want to use my name, playing a character called Roger. What was it again? Roger Evans. Roger Evans was the name of the title on the title. We'd done World's Fastest Gamer. We'd done play-by-play for that. Admittedly, some of the real world stuff. I'd been involved from the very start with the Nissan Sofa to Arnage sort of program in with the PlayStation competition that saw people like Jan Mardenborough come through. Jan's still running in Super GT, of course, the GT Academy. And more latterly with the Forza Motorsport World Championships. I did a couple of seasons for that, and then Shea jumped in and did some of that as well. So we were more than aware of what was going on out there in the virtual world. And actually, by the way, going back to Jim Martin, here's the other connection, joining the dots. Some people might remember a game called Sports Car GT, which was a very, very early sim game. And the voice on the PA in the background but certainly Road Atlanta, but I think some of the other tracks as well, it was vaguely an IMSA game, way back, way back, no multiplayers. That was Jim Martin. And that was how, when I first started commentating, I went, hang on, you're the voice of the PA guy on Sports Car GT. What's that? He said. Anyway, that's an aside. So we were more than aware of what was going on and the seriousness with which people were taking the online world of racing. And simulators, let's be honest, are used so often nowadays in motorsport, and there's quite a few good people around the IMSA paddock, including a mobile unit that can come in if you need to have a little bit of practice. When I race infrequently, it's never enough for me just to jump in the car because I'm not that talented. So I always go to somewhere like Darren Turner's place, which is half an hour, 45 minutes away, Base Performance Simulators, and go and do an hour or a couple of hours on the track and in the car. So we were aware of what was out there and how people were making a living out of it. With anything we do at RSL, at Radio Show Limited, we never get involved with it if we're not aware of the situation, if we can't do it with the best people, and also do it in the best way that we can do it. And if that means we have to bring something to it, we're not frightened of saying that. If that means that we can learn something from the people that we're with, we're not frightened of listening either. And this is exactly how it worked with iRacing. And immediately this was touted. We went to work with the guys at iRacing about how it was going to look and the camera plots And they put in an inordinate amount of work looking at the last couple or 3 years of Sebring, because that was the first event, to find, to plot the cameras to make it look much like TV. We helped them out with a live timing solution that was, they did timing. Of course they do for all of their events. But to do timing for an endurance event, and certainly to be able to call that in the depth that we wanted to do it, we needed something a little bit more. So we put some of our expertise and the guys that work with us for some of our strategy software that we use for endurance races, we put that into it. Eve went off and spoke to our IMSA Radio real world sponsors, and God bless them. We had Michelin, we had Mazda, we had Haggerty, who were a new sponsor ready to jump in 2020 before the big pause, as Eve calls it. And they all came across immediately into the virtual world. And that basically gave us the opportunity to put something together really nicely. We were in full lockdown here in the UK when we did that first Sebring on the Sebring weekend. So I was here right now with slightly fewer screens than I've got now. We've developed over the last 12 months or so. Nick Damon, my co-commentator, he was 45 minutes down the road in Milton Keynes, so 50 miles away, probably a little less as the crow flies, right again in the middle of the carbon fibre triangle. Ben Constant-Juris, another play-by-play commentator. Ben's dad, Bob, is the voice of all the Formula One presentations at the circuits, and we've known Ben since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. Very good commentator, and again, already had some experience in the virtual world. He was in the French Alps, so we couldn't have been more socially distanced. We literally did that without being in the same room. We worked with the guys at iRacing to find a solution to get the pictures to everybody at the same time. We worked with our guys to get a timing solution. And then we covered it like a real motor race. But in covering it like a real motor race, you've got to accept and explain that there are some differences too. Like, what is netcode? Why did he spear off there? He didn't get touched. So let's talk about latency. Nick went out and bought himself a rig so that he could get some more information about it. Ben already had a rig. I should say Nick as well, Nick Damon, is one of the foremost producers of radio-controlled racing television in the world. And I've done some commentary for him, everything up to World Championships. And we go about that exactly the same way. It's real racing. And we said from the start, with RC racing, it's real racing, it's just scale. Scale racing, real cars, real tracks, real racing. Online racing, virtual world, skill still real, competition still real racing. It might be in the virtual world, but every driver that I know that went into that, all the real world IMSA drivers all went, this is really hard. I'm not getting all the sensory stuff that I do. I can't feel the car moving around. It's just eyes and ears and force feedback. That's a skill. And Bruno Spengler, who ran away and hid with it, Ben had been doing so this was in March. The previous September, Ben had been doing an expo with BMW and with another sim product. Bruno couldn't keep the car on the track, and he ran away and hid with the IMSA Pro Series because he worked with people like Alexander Voss, who became a consultant to the BMW esports team and set these rig up better, practiced more. These guys took it really seriously. And I thought the racing was absolutely mega. Did we learn stuff? Would we do it the same way again? I don't think we'd make many changes. I think I'd like to see, going back to my old karting days, I think I'd like to see, because obviously you're looking at the front of the field, we had sometimes 45, 50 cars. I think I'd like to see 2 heats in a final so that we get a chance to see more people and you know, maybe the top 10 qualify through on qualifying and then the next 15 or 20 have to come out of 2 semi-finals, but like the old Formula Ford Festival. I think that would have been good. We talked about this, about how we could move it on, and it worked brilliantly. And let me say this. The reason that it worked brilliantly was because the guys at iRacing, Drew and the team up in Boston, take a bow, because they took it just as seriously as we did. and they wanted to make it look just the same as a real IMSA race. We had similar sponsors, we had similar features, we did a countdown to green, we did a grid read, we used the same jingles, we had a Michelin post-race tech, all of that stuff. And I think that brought it to life. Off the back of that, we did DNLS, we did all the big Blue Ribband iRacing events with VCO Esports that year. So that included Le Mans, Nürburgring 24 hours, Spa 24 hours. We did all of those. Petit Le Mans at the end of the season with the new LMP2 car as well. And I mean, Bruce Jones, former editor of Autosport magazine and noted motorsport author, he and I did the majority of the DNLS together, the Nürburgring series. And Bruce was, by his own admission, a tad skeptical about watching people race on a game. I reckon about 25 to 35 minutes into that first race, he'd forgotten. He was in it. He was absolute. And because he does our substantive Nürburgring series coverage, he knew all the places. And the first thing he said to me after the first 3-hour race was, oh my God, we've got cameras everywhere. We've got, when you ask, when you say, oh, what's happened to the BMW bank number 107 car? That should have been coming through now. And somebody spools back somewhere and gives you an onboard, an outside, a follow camera from the car behind, a drone camera if you want, sitting up wherever and moving around to see what exactly is happening, which bit's fallen off. It was brilliant. And all of the real world guys really, really appreciate the skill levels of the established stars. You've got like 10K Beneke, because that's 10,000 is his, Max Beneke is his I-rating. Anything above about 4,500, 5,000 and you're an alien as far as I'm concerned. He's 10,000. He's 10,000. And those guys are brilliant. Nürburgring 24, in the whole 24 hours, when they're treble and quad stinted in the darkness hours, and they had fewer than 20 incident points in 24 hours, not per driver, by the way, for the car. For the car.
And that includes off tracks too, like those 1Xs you get for dipping a tire. That's precise racing. And John, I mean, I love iRacing. I'm pretty sure you've competed in as well. I agree 100%. You just don't get the same feel, no matter how much you're putting into your rig, unless you're getting motion. You don't get that feel of the race car. So it's another skill, like you're saying. These people in esports truly have a skill set to drive those cars on those kinds of tracks.
Here's the thing, though. If there was a lot of respect from the drivers to the esports drivers, the esport drivers were frankly really shocked at how quick the real world drivers picked it up. Now, they don't have all the little nudgy bits, the last little bits, because that takes time. And I spoke to a very well-known Works GT driver. I won't say for which manufacturer, and I won't say who was invited to participate, and the manufacturer got right behind it and said, right, let's do some practice. Let's get you on there. Let's do some practice. So did some early practice. As soon as it opened for the event, did the practice, did 4 or 5 hours. Next day, another couple of hours. Next day, another couple of hours. Thought, right, I know what I'm doing. I've got a nice setup. Even bought a different screen, so the refresh rate was quicker, so the latency, the lag was shorter. Yeah, great. I'm into this. Nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. So then he talks to one or two of the other guys. How long did you practice? Oh, I did about, I don't know, maybe 9-10 hours. Yeah, you see, I did 70 hours. What? 70 hours before the event. And, when we talk to the guys who do the VCO Esports, the DNLS, the Nürburgring, when the new BMW M4 came out, and that was eligible in GT4 category, right. Oh, it's still all Porsche Caymans. Why is nobody... we've tested it. We're not quite there yet. And it took to 3/4 of the way through the season before people felt comfortable enough, and they still weren't quite there. But the advantage, of course, is you can have every car you want and not have to have a bigger trailer or more tyres. So if you've got the time, you can go out there and do carbon neutral testing like as much as you want, but you have to be prepared to do that. And somebody said to me, it's just a game. I said, I tell you what, you go and have a go. And if you think it's just a game, you'll get nowhere, mate, in that. Nowhere. I was stunned. I expected it to be a high standard. It surpassed my expectations. The racing side by side, millimetres apart, when you've got netcode, when you're on the Nürburgring, when you're at Sebring, when you're at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, with 3-4 cars around you, and when you're on the other side of the world as well. Let's not forget we had Australians taking part in the IMSA iRacing. Poor Shane, SVG, Shane van Gisbergen, his latency was probably 2 or 3 times everybody else's, so he couldn't race close to them. And once he sussed that out, he raced in a different way. What a mind!
He still smoked everyone too. Yeah.
His tire. I mean, his tire. The way he managed his tires, always had grip at the end. Didn't matter where it was. But all of that stuff, that's the stuff that we had to explain as if we were explaining a new set of regulations at Le Mans or a pit stop strategy. You know, we had to explain netcode because we were aware that there were people coming in who were watching it because, frankly, there was nothing else there. And I know people who came in and said, well, I'm going to give it a go because there's nothing else to watch. And went away going, I need to buy a steering wheel and a rig and quite a lot of people, including some of our staff, they're in a league, they compete. And the interesting thing is it informs their commentary of any virtual racing, but also of the real world, because it is that good. And if you know that coming up to turn 5 at Road Atlanta, you slightly run down the right-hand curb a little bit longer than perhaps you'd think you would and turn in a little bit later to miss that bump in the middle. Well, tell you what, mate, that's there in real life. And if you've learned that on a sim, you can take that knowledge into when you see something happen in the real world. And I think only motor racing does this, guys. And I think this is why you can't imagine it on FIFA or NBA or Major League Baseball. It's not exactly the same transferable skills. Whereas a steering wheel, a set of pedals, a track, a car, looking out of a windscreen, sitting with your racing gloves on, which all of the drivers do because it makes them feel right when they're gripping the wheel, talking to their engineers, all of that stuff, all of those are transferable skills. And Spengler was very, very clear to me at the end of IMSA Pro Racing and at the end of the DNLS, which they won that championship as well. When he got back into a car, he felt way, way sharper than he would have if he'd been sitting around for 3 months, even if he'd been going to the gym. Because what? It isn't soccer. If you're a soccer star and you're not playing soccer, you can kick a ball around. You can do circuit training. The drivers are still doing that. They're still keeping fit. But you can't go and rent a track and drive for 2 days. Well, you can, and there was a bit of testing going on. But in the absence of that, it was great. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And you know what? I'm delighted to see, because when we got back to racing after July, we had a couple of date changes for some of the online races so that the real world race guys who were then racing at the weekends. So we stopped racing on Saturdays for the digital Nürburgring series, moved it to a Tuesday night so the other guys could keep competing. And they were a great attribute to the championship. And I think what was really nice, particularly in all the big races, the spotlight that somebody like Spengler or Adam Christodoulou or any of the big names from IMSA coming in, or the sports car world, that shone on virtual racing, that light won't diminish. That's not going to go away. There's still going to be. And we're in fact talking about continuing our association with some of the big online events. We understand that we won't be doing full series because it's changed slightly. And clearly, like any form of the sport, there's got to be a business aspect to it as well. And that is a reality. But some of the bigger events, if they want us, we'll happily do it. And we're talking even right now about what we might be doing in 2021. And people like VCO Esports, they've taken it really seriously with photographs, getting real world photographs to learn how to take photographs in iRacing and apply their same skills to that. So Gary Paravani, who was doing some of that work, who's a brilliant photographer in the real world, and putting out press releases and helping teams with PR. Brilliant. That's exactly what it should be like. Shine a light on it. Like scale racing, virtual racing has its place. It has its place, no doubt.
And if anything, this year, especially your piece, as you said, as a one gear in this machine, you helped legitimize it. Everyone involved from IMSA, all across, you helped legitimize esports just as much as it was legitimate to drivers and participants with its real world activation. So, I mean, I think that's been the biggest thing this year is everyone has to know now esports is a destination, whether it is just for drivers to compete or for us to be entertained and enjoy a good race.
And that's the key. The key is it's entertainment. And when we say it was real racing, my God, it was real racing. The amount of times that things changed on the last lap of a race at the Nürburgring or in the IMSA iRacing Pro Series or in any of the big races we did for the VCO Esports, we interviewed the guys and either brought them onto Midweek Motorsport and did it live, or we packaged up some interviews and put it on the VCO Victory Lane spot on Midweek Motorsport, our flagship Wednesday programme that now scarily is into Series 16, can you believe it, in 2021. And these people became household names, not just in the virtual world, but to people for whom watching an iRace, spectating on an iRace, let's be honest, if you're going to say, I'm going to spectate for an iRace, people would say, really? Really? But what was interesting to us, and I think this was the other thing that got the crossover going, when you think of iRacing, and you guys know this, you think of how visually perfect it is and how dynamically good it is and how well it races in terms of the environment for everybody to be online and racing together. You can argue about which cars look prettier, which bits of light work better in all the different simulations. But for the racing experience, I don't think anybody will argue that iRacing has it nailed, particularly for multi-class racing. The other thing that they do really well that people other than probably me don't realise is the sounds of the cars. Outstanding. So whilst we were doing sound and vision and broadcasting that on Radio Show and across the network, we were also doing an audio only, much the same as we would do for IMSA or for the VLN or the Nürburgring 24. All of those, we do TV, in inverted commas, streaming or terrestrial linear TV. But we never forget that there may be some people who can't see the pictures. For people who on a Saturday morning tuned into the DNLS at the Nürburgring, if they were travelling around in the car and linked through Bluetooth, as far as they were concerned, they were listening to a VLN race because there was no difference because they couldn't see the visuals. They could hear us describing the action and they could hear what was going on in the background. And if we were saying that an AMG GT3 was going past a Porsche, or the onboard sound that you can hear at the moment is the AMG, now we're taking a look at it from the Porsche, and you can hear the engine difference, you're conjuring up that in your own mind. You're not seeing an iRacing version of it. You're seeing the version of it that you would be seeing if we were describing the real race. And that really made a difference to people who started then saying, hey, were they racing at the Nürburgring this weekend? Twitter. No. Hello, thanks for, RSL Studio. No, this is the iRacing. What? I'll need to watch this when I get back. It's just racing, guys. It's just racing.
Racing
John,
is racing.
We're nearing the dinner hour in the UK. I don't know if you're like me and you go to bed at like 9:30. It's almost time for dinner, so we won't keep you much longer.
It's a cocktail hour. If we're nearing the dinner hour, it's the cocktail hour. So I feel I'm slightly naked at the moment. Look, there's something missing. You need to get a bigger budget for this show, guys. Come on.
Yeah.
We'll try to get something to whet our palates in the future, hopefully, and we'll have you back on for that. If there's one thing I got to ask you really quick, and it's just because of what the extent Radio Le Mans goes to as far as the coverage. There's so many series throughout the world that you guys are able to cover. One thing I've always loved was touring car. British touring car has been my jam since I was a kid, and it's so hard to access it, but I'll go to great lengths to. What is like a series that you would recommend for a lot of our viewers that might not know or might just kind of be under the radar that's in a different region that can be accessed through Radio Le Mans?
Well, don't forget, touring cars is where a lot of this started, because when many years ago, and I worked for Autosport magazine, we started touring car radio, Talker Radio. That was even before we went over to the States, and that was on site at every event. There's always little gems. Sometimes it's a series, sometimes it's individual races. I mentioned Pikes Peak. We've been fortunate enough over the last few years with some of our long-term sponsors, Mobile One in one case, and Haggerty this year, 2020, last year, to be involved with that. And I got to go the year that Bentley broke the streetcar SUV record with the Bentayga. Smashed it, actually, into smithereens. That to me was, I'm pretty scared of heights. So going 14,000 odd feet up in the air in a Hertz hired Jeep Cherokee driving up there. It's bad enough driving up. Driving down was even worse, actually. Both feet on the brake pedal. Hand on the handbrake. That was great. And it's difficult to cover that. We did some coverage of that this year with Haggerty, and that kind of worked as well. Those guys worked really hard. That's a one-off event, and there's so many of those one-off events. You mentioned Bathurst. Well, Bathurst part of the Intercontinental GT series, but that's come latterly. Bathurst is an individual event that is smashing, and they're much easier to find, of course. But there are little gems that are still sitting out there. Nürburgring, all the Nürburgring events, I think are worth watching, mainly because there are still people out there who think the Nürburgring Nordschleife, the North Loop, is the product of a tortured programmer's mind, and it doesn't actually exist in real life. I've had a few people ask me that down through the years. What do you mean the Nürburgring Nordschleife? No, it's just on Gran Turismo, isn't it? It doesn't really exist. Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
And you can go drive it too.
And you can, yes, it's much more expensive than it used to be. But I remember when you could get 4 laps for €30. I think it's €30 a lap now, which slows you down a wee bit. But yeah, still worth it. We've been involved with people like the 24-hour series, Creventic, great bunch of Dutch guys who started off 15, 20 years ago now with the Dubai 24 hours, and have morphed that into an international series. And of course, I was fortunate enough in 17 to race in the 24 hours of Quarter in one of their events with an Aston Martin Lagonda Works entry, a GT8, GT3 car, V8 Vantage. Those guys put on great events. They cater to people who want to go racing. And the amount of people who have watched those and or listened to our coverage or watched our coverage and then said, do you know what? I think I can get 4 people together and we could probably do that. And then they go out and do it. It's great. And that kind of access level motorsport. Yeah. There's Black Falcon AMGs in there, and there's great drivers in there, that your Damien Faulkners and, and some big names, Tom Onslow, Cole, all of these guys, Adam Christodoulou. And in fact, let's not forget the Toto Wolff, Formula One team manager for the moment, probably not for very much longer when he takes up his place at Aston Martin. He won the first Dubai 24 hours in a BMW, bizarrely. So it's those type of events. And I still like doing things like the Race of Remembrance that we do with one of our charity partners, Mission Motorsport, which is a fabulous set of guys who look after returning ex-servicemen, veterans, men and women, some of whom have physical issues when they come back from doing the things that we've sent them off to do because we don't want to do them ourselves. Some of their injuries can't be as easily seen. And like many countries in the world, we're not very good at looking after those people. We tend to forget them once they've given their service, and Mission Motorsport makes sure that doesn't happen. And we've looked after them for a long time. And one of the things that they do every Veterans Day, effectively, Memorial Weekend, is the Sunday closest to the 11th of November here in the UK. They have a 6 or an 8 hour race somewhere, multi-class race for mostly saloon, touring car type things, production saloons. A few things like caterums that get in there as well. They're like the prototypes of that race because they're super quick and you can't get anywhere near them. And we've covered that. And people say, why do you cover that? Because it's really, really entertaining. And because there's so many good stories there. Because you hit on something earlier on, guys. And it's a good place to finish, actually, isn't it? Because I remember going back to those days of Le Mans hybrids, the LMP1 hybrids, reading those regulations, as I mentioned before, and thinking, how am I going to explain that the equalization of technology between a flywheel here, a battery there, which doesn't have as much power as this one either, so it's running under different regulations, and then there's this thing called a supercapacitor, which I don't even know how that works, and nobody can tell me in a way that I can relate it to anybody. How do I weave that into the play-by-play? And the answer is, if the racing's good, don't have to. It's not about the technology. We love the cars. We love the cars. Do we like watching a nicely turned out Porsche? Oh, yes. Yes. Sound of a flat 6 in the morning. That'll get you up. That'll get you stirred, won't it? Cracking the early morning mist at Road Atlanta or Le Mans, or the sonorous rumble of a Corvette V8, even the twin turbo Corvette V8, the C8R, or the low rev that sort of hits you about here from the AMG Mercedes-Benz V8, or a little screaming 2-litre inline from the TCRs in IMSA competition, or the 5.2 Lamborghinis. Yeah, great. All of those things, absolutely. We love all that because we love the cars. But ultimately, the stories. Joe Bradley, going back to Joe Bradley, who effectively I grew up with many years ago, although he was a bit older than me, so we didn't mix much at school, because you know what it's like. If you're older, you never mix with the younger ones. But we met up through our love of motor racing many years later. And he coined a phrase for the Creventic 24-hour series, which he now writes every event for their online program. And he said, there's a story behind every garage door, a soap opera behind every garage door. And endurance racing, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 24 hours, he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. And that's why we love racing. That's why we love longer distance racing. Is there a place for 25-minute sprints? Yes, of course there is. But a 500-mile race at Talladega, your guys' ballpark, that's an endurance race. And the way those guys work with the crew chiefs to get the car right in the last 50, 60 miles, that's as much, to me, an interesting story as whether Toyota have picked the right technology to go racing at Le Mans. Because it's the endurance aspect, it's the human interest of that Chad Knaus and Jimmy Johnson relationship, as was. Look at how they related to each other and what that meant to the performance in the end. The engine, the tyres, the crew, everything, yes. But also that relationship between people. And that, to me, is why those type of races mean more than anything else. And I think that's why people relate to them, because they're hearing a story. It's like reading a book where you can't skip to the end. An endurance race is a book where you can't skip to the end because it hasn't been written yet. You're reading it. The words are appearing on the page. And as you turn new chapter, sunshine, right? Dawn, right. I haven't got time to read all this. I'm going to go at the end and find out if Wayne Taylor Racing win with their new action. Oh, it's a blank page. That's endurance racing. It's the best page turner ever, but it's not been finished yet. So you're going to have to just sit and find out. Where's the most important part of the race? We don't know. It might have been something you saw 10 minutes, 10 laps, an hour and a half ago. It might be round the next corner. we don't know. Live sport at its best. Endurance racing. Love it.
Agreed, John. Honestly, that's why we love it so much, and that's why I find it so appealing of a 24-hour event. I've been up for 40 hours last 2 years in a row at the Rolex 24 to take everything in, and it's great. And we'll kind of end there. We just want to say if there's anything you want to promote coming up, into the Rolex 24 is coming up, also 24 hours of Dubai. We're going to do some promotion of the Rolex 24 on our channel. So if you want to talk a little bit about that, feel free to.
Well, and we've just tidied up, actually, not one but two websites. We've just launched IMSARadio.com, which is going to be the new portal for pretty much everything IMSA, and will include, obviously, the ability to be able to listen and watch. Much of what we do for IMSA is available inside and outside of the USA. So that's IMSARadio.com. Have a look at that. That's still a bit of a work in progress, and we'll get tidied up. The main site, which is radiolemans.com or radio-show.co.uk, goes to the same place. That's had a bit of a nip and a tuck for 2021. Tim Gray, our technical expert, has worked really hard on that, made things a little easier to get to, much easier to get to the videos, and on the IMSA Radio site as well, I should say. Easier to find things like the player, subscribe to the different channels that we've got for archive, for podcasts. So there's a separate channel for Midweek Motorsport, a separate channel for ACO. There's a channel where you pretty much get everything, and our road tests and all that sort of stuff, good stuff that we do. So give them a little bit of look. I'm sure you'll find something that you like. Guys, keep up the good work. Keep up the enthusiasm. It's been a pleasure to be with you and share a bit of time. What I think we've all missed, isn't it, in the last year, as it almost is now, is interacting. And doing it this way it's not perfect, but it's a damn sight better than nothing. And it's been an absolute pleasure to see and hear you two. And I feel I've done rather too much of the talking, but thank you very much indeed for letting me just make sure the vocal cords are all right before we get to Dubai and to the start of the IMSA season. And all of our schedules, by the way, are on the bottom of that, the sites that we were talking about, the auto-convert into your time wherever you are with your browser.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, John. We really appreciate it. And we will, I'm sure we'll see you hopefully sooner rather than later.
Well, guys, only one thing we can hope for in 2021 is that things get better. We all get back to a racetrack soon, and everybody stays safe and healthy. Do what you need to do, guys. Don't underestimate what's going on in the world. Just be careful so that we can all get back together and have happy racing tales to tell this time next year.
All right. Thanks so much.
Cheers, guys.
And that was a great interview with John. We really thank him for being on board, giving us so much time and talking as much as we did. I'm hoping we gave his lyrics just a bit of a warm up before his first couple of endurance races he's got to cover this month for the year. It's a busy schedule for him starting the season.
Yeah, he's got 2 24-hour races in 1 month, so a lot to go. Yeah, but thanks to Blue Emu again, our sponsor, for supporting us and letting us do all of this. Be sure to stay locked this month to the Flashback to the Track podcast, because video content is back, folks. It's been a while, but James and I have video content dropping this month that just might be about sports car racing, because it's sports car month in January. So we decided sports car month.
So thanks again to John. Thanks again to Blue Emu, our partner, and fans. Go tune in to the Rolex 24. It will be on, I believe, major television broadcast, NBC. But if you don't want to watch it on NBC, go to IMSARadio.com, and you get to listen to the live radio broadcast, which to me, I like to put the television coverage on and then the radio broadcast, because I always like the radio podcast more.
Pro hack. I was going to say that. Do that, because you get to hear John, but you get the NBC images.
Yeah, so. and it's great, but I just, between John and especially Shay, I always love Shay Adams on Pit Road, just giving us the insights and the scoop. It's a great, because to me, it's like watching that casual conversation that you have with a fan while you're watching a race. You're having that casual conversation. That's what it's like listening to John. So I feel like my buddy's listening to the race with me, and we're just chatting.
Yeah, Rolex 24, 3:40, or I believe the broadcast starts at 3:00 on Saturday, January the 30th. So be sure to check it out. And guess when it ends? Sunday at 3:40 January 31st, because it's 24 hours long. So be sure to check it out. NBC's coverage has been solid the last couple of years. So be sure to check out the race. And if you can, do so safely. If you're in the Daytona area, maybe buy a ticket and go to the race, sit in the grandstand, socially distance, of course. Make sure you be safe.
There's a lot of seats in that grandstand. You can definitely fit a couple between you and somebody else.
So you know what? Maybe even go check it out. There are tickets at the Daytona International Speedway website. So again, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will catch you in the next episode of Flashback to Track Podcast.